Good morning, everybody. Please can I welcome everyone to this meeting of Cabinet on Wednesday, the 14th of December from the Walton Suite, Winchester Guildhall. The time is 9:30 a.m. My name is Councillor Martin Todd, Chairperson of the Cabinet and Leader of the Council. This meeting is being audio recorded, live streamed, and will be available on the Council's YouTube channel. Subtitles are available and advice on how to turn this on is set out on our website. If you are joining us online, please turn your camera and microphone off until your item, although I don't think anybody will be joining us online. Can everyone ensure that their mobile phones are on silent or switched off? Lastly, can I remind colleagues to use their microphones and speak directly into them. Please do not turn away when speaking to enable your comments to be picked up on the recording meeting. In the unlikely event that it is necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow all the instructions given to you by our team. Turning to the agenda. First item is apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Porter. I'm not aware of any other apologies. Counting everybody up, I don't think there's anybody else who's meant to be here who isn't able to attend. The second item is membership of Cabinet committees. So we have no changes on that today. The third item is disclosures of interest. I need to declare an interest, a personal non-pecuniary interest, as a member of the County Council. Since some items do have county-related aspects to them. I don't know if there are any other declarations of interest. No. Item 4 is a request from councillors to speak, and I can see that Councillor Horrell and Councillor Wallace are here. Councillor Horrell, I have you down to speak on items 9, 11, 12 and 13, which are the housing paper, the community infrastructure levy paper, the Pride in Place paper and the Quarter 2 report. And Councillor Wallace, I have you down for council plan, the housing company or not? No, didn't think so. Tree strategy and community infrastructure levy funding. And I will call you when we get to those items. I've not, so item 5 is public participation. I don't have any request for public participation in this meeting. Item 6 is the minutes of the previous meeting held on November the 15th of November 2022. Colleagues, do you have any comments or questions to those minutes? Otherwise, can we please agree them as an accurate record? Thank you very much. Item 7 is leader and cabinet member announcements. I have 3 things to announce. Firstly, we are making an adjustment in cabinet portfolios. So as a clarification of roles, Councillor Becker, who's the cabinet member for inclusion and engagement, will be extending her responsibilities within her portfolio to cover grants, community development, health and sport and open space. Councillor Ferguson, deputy leader, who's currently responsible for some of those areas, retains overall responsibility for community and housing, including the Ukrainian support for Ukrainian refugees and the cost of living crisis. The second announcement, coming out of our ongoing programme to tackle antisocial behaviour and vandalism, I'm very pleased to report that the City Council's bid to the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner requesting grant funding for 3 mobile CCTV cameras has been successful. Particular thank you to Chief Inspector John Turton and Davina de Mona-Hollands for presenting our bid to the Antisocial Behaviour Task Force meeting. Identification, the ability to respond flexibly to where we're seeing problems with building damage, graffiti and other such issues, so that we can identify the people doing it and take appropriate action is an important element of our antisocial behaviour programme. So it's really good news that we've received this funding. And we'll be talking later about a bit more about CCTV and our wider work to ensure that Winchester and the district remains a place not only that is safe for our residents, but feels safe as well. And finally, one last comment for those of you who haven't done so already. If you have any further submissions to make to the local plan, we have until midnight tonight. We've had a lot of interest and good submissions. We've always said that the purpose of this consultation is to make the local plan better and stronger than it is, and I'm pleased that local residents have taken that in the spirit that it's intended, and we have definitely got some good ideas that will help us make the plan better than it is already. In terms of other announcements, Councillor Gordon-Smith, I believe you have an announcement.
Yes, I'm very pleased to announce the launch of the new Your Winchester app. It is simpler and more logical in its layout. It's got links to Hampshire County Council for often repeated requests for pothole repairs. It's been extensively tested, and we're always keen to have feedback for it. And it's part of our policy to encourage digital communication from residents, information about missing bins or bin calendars and so on. And I'd like to thank Communications and IT for sorting this out, making it much more logical and easy to use.
Thank you very much indeed. I've had a go with it, and it's definitely a lot better. So thank you for that work. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Leader. Cabinet, I'm delighted to announce that at very long last we have received confirmation from the government of our allocation of £1 million from the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. So just to recap, this fund will run over 3 years, beginning right now, and is very much backloaded, i.e. the bulk of the money is to be spent in year 3. And because there is no facility currently to carry over funds from one year to the next, receiving this confirmation now is doubly important. So this is really welcome news and means we can start delivering on the fund's 3 priorities: community in place, supporting jobs and businesses, and people and skills. As you will know, I've been visiting our market towns and larger settlements to discuss how this fund might help them, and I am determined that proceeds of this fund are spread across our district to make sure that everyone has a chance to see improvements to their area. I'm delighted to say that one such project which we're working on at pace now is to build on the success of the Light Festival we held last February. Planning is still underway, but I'm really pleased to report that the intention is that it will run for 3 weeks in February 2023 and include not only Valentine's Day, but also half-term week and lead into the start of the cathedral's own event. It will be based around Abbey Gardens on an enchanted light garden theme, and it will be a free event for everyone, and it will be something to really look forward to once the glitter and glamour of Christmas and the New Year is over and the weather is cold and dreary. So, as I've said, officers are now working at pace to ensure we can deliver this at such short notice, because of course we've only just had notification that the money is forthcoming, and it is hoped that this will form the foundation for future events in years to come, and also it will have the ability to scale up in future across the district. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank officers who I know are working really hard to ensure that we can put this on, and I know we will all look forward to seeing it when it happens in February. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. That's that's great news. I'm glad that we're being able to put the money to such productive use. Councillor Power, nothing from you. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. I don't think we have any other announcements. So moving to the next item of business, which is the refresh of the council plan. I will quickly introduce that. Back in 2021, we finally signed off a plan, the council's plan, designed to take us through to 2025 with 5 priority areas: tackling the climate emergency, living well, homes for all, vibrant local economy, and your services, your voice. Since then, as you'll see later in the meeting, we've made robust progress across all those areas, and our recent residents survey shows that these remain the priorities that local people want us to focus on in the medium and long term. However, we made the decision, or I made the decision, in the light of recent events, that it would be useful to add a bit of focus on a few areas for the coming 12 months or the coming period. And so we've adjusted the plan, refreshed the plan in order to reflect that. The first thing that we're all, I think, intensely aware of, that we didn't know at the time the plan was being written, aside from small matters like the pandemic, is the economic situation. We're all facing greater uncertainty, rising prices, rising interest rates, rising inflation, taking us back to an economic situation that we haven't really seen since the 1990s. And this is affecting everybody in the district, some people very badly, particularly those whose financial position is already most stretched. And so the plan lays out our priority to take action to tackle the cost of living. The second thing, which I think we're all very aware of, is that our weather is changing. We're seeing more extreme weather events. Climate change is hitting us harder sooner than we expected. Flash flooding, extreme temperatures, water shortages, and this is knocking on to the work of the council, affecting our health, our homes, our businesses, our natural environment, our chalk streams, our rivers, the unique countryside that we live in. And so very consciously, we've highlighted a priority within this plan that we have to go greener faster. We have to accelerate our work in this area because the impacts are hitting us sooner than anybody thought, than most people thought. And so it is particularly important that we put more specifics in place on that. The second thing is really just highlighting something that I know is very important to everybody in this district. We started work, we had a particular problem with antisocial behaviour and vandalism, but there is a general need, if our district is going to thrive and to continue to be the great place to live, that we continue to support our public space, that we tackle issues. We work hard with our partners to deliver pride in place. And finally, one of the things that has come back to us and which we want to reflect in our plan is what we know from the first years of implementing this plan is that the council works best when it recognises and listens to the diverse interests, needs, wishes of different people in our community. And so we are setting forward a priority to listen better and work alongside people, businesses of the district in tackling the various challenges that we face. So that those 4 areas are a sort of extra lens that we're putting into this council plan: tackling the cost of living, going greener faster, delivering pride in place right across the district, and listening better to our residents. And this plan that you have in front of us aims to go into how we're going to do that. And finally, cost of living crisis isn't just affecting residents and businesses, it's also affecting councils as well. And so we recognise that we do live in a period of greater economic uncertainty. We are still going to face some hard choices, and we've started the work of highlighting that within this plan. So overall, our strategic direction remains unchanged. The plans, inevitably, we've learnt as we've gone along, we've listened to people as we've gone along and have been adjusted to affect that. And we have these 4 sort of focus areas sitting within the plan that we need to address in the coming period. So that's what we have in front of us today. I know that Cabinet and officers have all had a chance to input into this. We've also taken the opportunity to refresh and focus the key performance indicators that we are looking at. I think maybe we'd not assigned enough value to the word key in terms of drawing up the list that we wanted. So we had a long list of performance indicators. What we've tried to do with this revised plan is focus in on the ones that are particularly important and I think will help drive the biggest improvement within the organisation. So that's the plan we have in front of us. We're now at the point where I think we have a deputation from Councillor Wallace, who wants to make some comments on the plan.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair. All right, the recommendation on the council plan refresh is twofold. Firstly, that the plan is taken to full council for adoption, and secondly, on the KPIs that are adopted to measure progress in 2023. My comments today are on the KPIs. The Carbon Roadmap report that was presented at this month's Health and Environment Policy Committee stated that the existing actions are not sufficient to reach carbon neutrality by 2030, and that many of the interventions identified are underway but not at the scale and pace required. The KPIs are the council's way of monitoring progress and driving behaviours. So the KPIs need to reflect the goal of going greener faster and not simply continuing business as usual. At the moment, all the KPIs are backward looking. If we are to shift to going greener faster, the green KPIs need to be measured up against plans for going greener faster. So, for example, on homes, instead of an annual measure of percentage of all council homes achieving an energy efficiency rating of C or above, there should be a plan, monthly KPIs against that plan for getting council homes up to this minimum standard. Similarly, in order to achieve the district carbon targets, there should be a plan and KPI measured against that plan for improving the energy efficiency of owner-occupied, private, rented and social homes. As well as looking at the household waste quantities, there needs to be a plan with dates for delivering the green improvements, such as switching away from diesel collection vehicles and for moving to the new household waste recycling facility. On business, there is a green economic development strategy, but there are currently no KPIs for measuring the progress of businesses in the district moving towards carbon neutrality. How can the council measure progress? It appears that other 22 KPIs, for example, around travel, have been removed. Whilst I appreciate that Winchester Council is not directly responsible for much of the transport infrastructure, depending on the measures used, transport counts for up to 60% of the district's carbon footprint, and therefore reducing carbon emissions from transport is a key element in reducing our carbon emissions locally. So even if it's not directly controllable, it needs to be measured. I'm sure that's enough examples for now, but simply to say that if used in the right way, KPIs can be a powerful means of unifying people towards a common goal while making everyone accountable for performance in achieving those goals. I hope the Cabinet will consider updating the KPIs, as with the right KPIs, there is a great opportunity for a step change in outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Wallace, and thank you for raising those. And I share your desire to ensure that we're making progress against the plans that are outlined in here. I think, and I share also, and I know Cabinet shares, the focus on a deliverable action plan in order to achieve our carbon targets. If you look, and we'll be coming to discuss this at a later item on the agenda, item 13, I would stress that the KPIs are not the only way that we measure how we're progressing on the council plan. So the quarterly reporting pack has 4 elements. Firstly, a narrative account of all the achievements in the previous quarter that relate to the council plan priorities. Secondly, an update on the KPIs, and this will change to reflect the KPIs, which are backward-looking. They are meant to be performance, not plan indicators, that we are talking about today and that are in the plan today. Thirdly, if you look in that section, there is then a financial update, providing an update on financial performance and expectations for the balance of the financial year. And then fourthly, we have what's called the major projects progress review, and the carbon neutrality action plan is highlighted as a major project. And so if you go into that section of the paper, what you will see there is the detailed list of actions that we're working against, as well as whether those actions are on track or not. Now, there is a discussion, and this is why we have put forward the plan to go greener faster, whether the actions that we've been tracking up until now have the pace and scale that are needed in order to achieve our targets. And that process of review is ongoing, and the meeting you were at, the Health and Environment Scrutiny Panel, Policy Panel, looked at one of the pieces of evidence that we've received in order to look at how we go greener, faster and strengthen our plans. So I can assure you that the KPIs sit alongside action plan tracking, which will be happening at the same time. But maybe I can see that Councillor Lerney has been making notes, and she will no doubt correct and add a bit of detail to what I've just said. But if Councillor Lerney, if you could maybe say a few words about how we are going to take the intent to go greener, faster, and not just tackle the performance, report the performance as we've highlighted in these KPIs, but also the measure and improve and strengthen plan delivery.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Yeah, I really welcome that we're refreshing the council plan today, and particularly that emphasis on going greener, faster. I think Councillor Wallace is absolutely right about scale and pace, and indeed the carbon roadmap illustrated that. But what we do need to remember is that we're not measuring the output of a factory in widgets. To a great extent, we're measuring other people's behaviour within the district roadmap. Actions by residents and businesses are key, and while we can take actions to promote them to take many of these steps, it's very difficult for us to do that in a way which wouldn't be very lumpy. Inevitably, we would end up with some indicators which, rather than driving behaviour, just led us to either beat ourselves up or say we were doing much better than we actually were in terms of our own actions. I'm really keen on having performance indicators which drive behaviour change, and I think that's something that we need to look at very closely and think about. And I think it's also important to say that what we're talking about in connection with the council plan is those strategic indicators. There are a huge amount of performance measures which lie underneath that. As I said, you know, a lot of these things are actually out of our control, and I really don't want to measure things which are the result of other people's actions rather than ours. But on the other hand, we do need to have that overall level, which is why clearly we have the city 2024 target and the district 2030 target, which we will be monitoring and looking at where we need to fill in the gaps. But in many cases, we're finding that other people are actually taking some of the actions that we might do, but that's allowing us to focus our efforts elsewhere, and it's a constantly movable feast. It would be lovely if we could do this in a full project management Prince 2 style level of tracking, but it's very lumpy and it doesn't quite work like that. For example, the new HWRC, the new MRF coming on track. Yes, we have a date for that, but that is entirely outside our control. and that will be when it happens, we will have a step change, but until it happens, there will be no progress to report really, apart from, yes, we're on track and there will be this date. But we fully accept the need to develop a comprehensive suite of performance indicators lying underneath our strategic ones. I would also say that part of the carbon roadmap work has involved creating a carbon roadmap tracker, which allows us to feed in potential activities and project the impact they might have going forward. So I think in terms of that forward look, rather than always looking backwards, I think that is a really important step forward. Remembering that we do have limited capacity and we are a small organisation trying to punch very much above our weight in what we're doing.
Thank you, Councillor Lerney. So we've raised quite a few issues there. I've covered, obviously this plan is important to all of us as members of Cabinet. I just wondered if any Cabinet colleagues had any questions further to what's already been raised. Councillor Ferguson.
If I may, Leader, it's not a question. I just wanted to address the specific point about the annual target for housing to become energy rated C and above. That sits in the housing KPIs, but there is also a KPI under the climate emergency that looks at quarterly retrofit measures being completed. And again, I'd just like to echo what Councillor Lerney was saying. Even though those figures will be reported, it doesn't mean that we won't be monitoring that retrofit work on a monthly basis. So there is the detail underneath. Leader, my question really, and it's perhaps a question and a statement, is just how important is this council plan? I know for me as a Cabinet member, it is an absolutely key document which I refer to on a regular basis and take very seriously, because it does absolutely set out our priorities and our direction, our intent, and what we want to achieve and do, and we do hold ourselves accountable to it. But I wondered, for the benefit of perhaps those who are listening, perhaps you might want to say more about how important this document is to us.
No, thank you very much indeed, Councillor Ferguson. Yeah, it is absolutely critical to us. This is, as Cabinet engagement with others, engagement with officers, as the priorities of the Council. And I mean, coming back to the discussion that's been made, we will be reporting back on this, both the performance indicators that show how the organisation is performing and the outcomes it's delivering, but also in terms of planned progress. That is something that gets reported on quarterly, and where we have more detailed plans in place, they are also included in detail in terms of the performance pack. I don't know, one item that I think got mentioned briefly by Councillor Lerney and that has been touched on is that we're not responsible for everything within the plan. And I know that that's a particular concern in the area of the carbon programme. We have been asked by the County Council to be part of what they call a regeneration and growth partnership with them, where we talk about how the County Council can help us with our regeneration project and how we engage on the wider question of growth across the county. I have made it very clear to the leader of Hampshire and the Chief Executive of Hampshire, alongside our Chief Executive, that carbon is within scope of that. And we do expect to be having senior discussions about mutual progress, mutual collaboration, how we can help them accelerate their plans, how they can help us accelerate our plans in terms of carbon, and that we would expect to centre on that in future sort of leadership conversations between our two organisations. I have been looking at the county talks at some length about how they are managing partnership working. We obviously have that as an important part of how we deliver our carbon programme as well. What was missing, I think, when I looked at it, was senior enough engagement to make sure that the wider organisations on both sides are treating it with the sort of integrated collaborative approach that's needed, and that is something that is now being put in place. Colleagues, are there any debate points that you wish to make that you haven't made already on this plan? Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Leader. I've already said about the importance of this plan and the refresh plan, and I welcome the introduction of the corporate priorities. The cost of living crisis is something that we need to be cognizant of. The greener, faster is absolutely something that we need to do, and we are already going greener, faster. And if we look at some of the achievements that are noted in the plan, we can see that we're taking this very seriously and we have made very good progress, although there is still a lot more to be done. Also, the Pride in Place, we know that's very important, and that listening while engaging while is something that's very, very key. I know when I look at the council plan, I look at the Homes for All, that there are significant challenges. We still live in one of the most expensive housing markets in the country, both for owning and renting. And we are serious when we talk about how do we actually provide homes for all, and there are additional pressures on those homes as we speak. We have new people coming into our community, both through the Ukrainian resettlement scheme, other asylum seekers, but we also know that we have lots of people who'd like to live here if they could afford to do so. So I very much welcome the plan. I welcome the corporate priorities. I still am very proud that it puts the addressing the climate emergency at the heart and the centre, and I'm looking forward to us continue to achieve against this plan going forward. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Any Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I too am very happy to support this paper and the recommendations. And as colleagues have said, this council plan is absolutely integral in setting the strategic direction of the council, and it sets out our clear priorities for the year ahead. And given the extremely challenging circumstances we're facing, not only as a council in maintaining our services, but as well as for our residents and businesses, it is right that at this stage we take time to consider our priorities, and I believe this refresh is very timely. And as the Cabinet member responsible for the local economy, I am acutely aware that the next few months, and indeed the next year or two, are going to be extremely turbulent for our businesses. And in Winchester, for example, we do currently punch above our weight in terms of our shop vacancy rate, which is half that of other similar sized cities. And I'm really pleased to say that our high street is busy and vibrant, and somewhere that residents and visitors alike really want to come. But challenges around rising heating bills, difficulty in recruiting staff, and wage pressures from those that are employed, not to mention a falling clientele because residents have much less money to spend in their pockets and are watching every penny, could change all of that. So we really need to be able to provide support where we can to ensure that our high streets, both here in Winchester and in our market towns, continue to thrive. So we cannot be complacent about the difficult times ahead, and I believe this revised council plan gives us the tools to take on these challenges, to help and support our businesses and residents alike where they need it most. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Power, your finger is loitering by the button.
Thank you, Lord Leader. I just wanted to mention how pleased I am with this shorter, sharper list of strategic KPIs. They are indicators which enable us to have a conversation with anybody throughout the district to say this is what we're doing and this is how well we're doing, and if we're not doing well, what we're going to do about it. I think they deserve a merit all of their own. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Power. Any other questions or comments from colleagues? I think we've probably covered all the issues that needed to be said during the debate. I think it's been very helpful to talk about how a focused list of KPIs will help us drive action. The importance of this document for all aspects of the council, and I know that it is heavily used in bringing on new staff members and to help set direction, used by the heads of department to clarify what the wishes and the direction of the council is, and that they find it useful to do that. I can reassure those that the KPIs are not the only thing we look at, and in particular, plan delivery is an absolutely integral part of how we use the council plan. I'm very confident that this sets the right direction for us in the period ahead. So, colleagues, can we look at the recommendations and quickly agree them? The proposals in front of us are that we take the this update to the council plan to full council for adoption, and that we adopt the strategic key performance indicators to come into effect from April 2023. Is everybody agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed. The next item on the agenda is the housing company, and I believe we have Gilly Knight and Simon Maggs here, who are available if to support on the paper. But Councillor Ferguson, this is your paper, so could you please introduce it?
Thank you, Leader. We also have Dick Johnson, well, who'll be joining us. I know that establishing a housing company has been an ambition for some time, so I am actually very pleased today to be able to introduce a paper which sets out the business case, a viable business case for the establishment of a wholly owned local housing company that would allow the City Council to address a clearly identified need within the current housing market, i.e. the shortage of longer-term affordable rented properties that are well-designed, energy efficient, and have that backing of what we term an institutional grade landlord, i.e. a landlord that is committed to providing community housing in the long term. This can offer private renters the assurance that if they wish to rent their home for an extended period, they will not suddenly find themselves having to move out because their landlord has decided either to increase the rent to such a level that they can no longer afford, or the landlord wants to use the property for a different purpose or to take the property back. It's widely recognised that Winchester District has some of the most expensive housing in the country. We've already commented on that in the local plan when we were talking about the council plan. But that's in terms not just of buying property, but also of renting property. And in particular, there is a shortage of affordable rented property of a high quality. This means that those on low incomes, young people, young professionals, and those who are often designated as key workers often struggle to find a home in our district. Within the council plan, providing homes for all is a key priority. And as an administration, we have made a commitment to delivering an additional 1,000 new council-owned homes between 2021 and 2030, and we are already making good progress. Now, while a large proportion of those homes will be for social housing and be available to residents on the housing register, we recognise that we also need to consider how we provide homes for those who do not qualify to apply through the housing register, but who do need to access affordable longer-term housing, which is in very limited supply. The establishment of a wholly owned local housing company that could provide this high-quality housing would allow us to meet this need. The paper before you clearly sets out the case for setting up a wholly owned local housing company that would lease properties from the council and offer a product that complements the council's other offerings, housing offers, including social housing and shared ownership. Importantly, the model being proposed would offer tenants far greater security of tender than that is available within the private rented sector. Again, this is because, and it's really important to stress this, the local housing company, as landlord, would have a long-term commitment to renting homes to the community. Tenants would benefit from living in well-designed, energy-efficient homes and from renting from a landlord that offers high-quality property management and maintenance services. The report sets out a proposal for the establishment of the company and provides an illustrative business model based on leasing the 41 new flats that are currently under construction in Winnall to the company. These flats will be made available at market rents, and analysis shows these would be accessible to those groups we have identified who often find it difficult to access this type of property. The illustrative business model shows that provided rents are set at a market rent, the housing company is viable over a 30-year period. And while that viability is relatively marginal, the social benefits of setting up the local company to address this identified needs is compelling. This will also allow us to meet a commitment that we made to the Winnall community, that the new flats at Winnall would lead to a diversification of tenure on that estate. I hope that the Cabinet will support the recommendations today, but I'm pleased to have both Gillian Knight, Simon Maggs and Dick Johnson in the room with us, who have all been instrumental in pulling this paper together. And if there are any questions, I'm sure we'll be pleased to answer them. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Horrell, I believe you want to say a few words on this paper.
Chair, good morning, and thank you for allowing me to address Cabinet this morning. As many of you will know, as I was on the start of this journey, I'm delighted to see a paper about the housing company coming to Cabinet today. And although that's an iteration on previous ideas about how we might set this up, I think it is important that we have such a vehicle available to us to actually help in the housing provision that we wish to make in the district. It's an important part of our commitment to a mixture of tenures across the district, and as has already been referenced, is especially important given the cost of accommodation in the area at the moment and the pressures that our residents are finding themselves under. However, there are two key questions that I would like to ask, and obviously we haven't been able to see this paper at Cabinet Housing before, so I'm asking questions that I might have asked in another place, and I hope you'll take those in the spirit in which they're shared today. And I see on the recommendations that there will be further work done on the details of the housing company that will be brought forward for approval, and I hope that they can be addressed at that time. The first is really about governance, which is detailed as an outline in the appendices. But in fact, the final proposal is not due until a later stage. My question is that given housing is such an important cross-party and universally accepted objective for the council, whether we could have representation from a broader councillor group. I'm sorry, Chair, I'm not sure that everything is working properly here. Whether you would accept a broader representation of councillors on the governance body for the housing company. The second is to really ask the officers who are at the table, and I know that they've been working endlessly on the project, is just to clarify in a very simple way for all of us listening, the process for HRA properties and general fund properties. My understanding is the body would sit in the general fund, but the HRA and general fund properties could be part of the portfolio on a case-by-case basis. And I'd just like to better understand from the officer team that relationship of the HRA and general fund, the holding of the company, as it were, but also where those properties come from. I hope that's helpful, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. And yes, it's always helpful to get questions that clarify issues on the paper, and that's much appreciated. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Horrell, for your support for the housing company and recognition of the need for this vehicle to offer that mixed tenure. The proposals around the governance are yet to be finalised. There is still significant work to be done on that, but I think it's a legitimate request to ask that we look at how that governance is set up, and given the importance of the housing issue, who is representative on that committee. So thank you for bringing that point to us. I'm not sure who is going to answer the second question about how the different houses, how the different properties from HRA and General Fund could fit within the housing company. I don't know if that's you, Simon.
Yeah, I've got, that's the long straw. It's the long straw, not the short straw. So the model is a leasing model. The company doesn't go out and acquire properties. It leases properties from the council, and the council, and those properties could sit in either the general fund or the HRA. And you quite rightly identified that the decision on whether to accept to offer on behalf of the council will be made by the council, whether they're HRA or the council, and a decision made by the housing company whether to accept that offer. But they will sit within the council to start.
Chair, would I be able to
Not
ask?
really, but on this occasion, because I think it's an important issue for clarification. So if you do have a further question for clarification.
You're most kind. Thank you. Thank you, Simon. So the properties could come from any part of the council portfolio, HRA or general fund, but the housing company sits within the general fund portfolio. Is that correct?
Yes, it is correct. It's important that we have to ensure we know the sort of line there between what is a general fund product and actually a company that has to be a commercial vehicle in itself. So we are starting at the moment, yes, with the Winnall properties, and I think we want to start, gradually. But we also want to have the opportunity to increase the company's portfolio if we are able to purchase properties or lease properties through the company. And some of the example around that might be trying to help some of our homeless households who are struggling to afford private rented. It might be that we want to lease it and use it for more vulnerable households. So it's having, we can only have 5 properties per year. That could be a block of flats. But at the moment, we're trying to be steady in how we start. We'll start with Winnall, learn from that, and then have that opportunity to lease other properties through the company if possible. It's going to be a tricky balance for us because it is a different product, really.
If there are any further questions on the theme, I think they'll come from Cabinet. Councillor Ferguson, you want a further point on that?
Again, I just think it's important for clarity that even if properties come from the HRA, for example, because it's a leasing company, the ownership of those properties remains with the HRA. They are simply leased to the housing company. And the housing company actually then provides a substantial revenue stream back to the HRA during the course of the period that those properties are leased. And at the end of that period, those properties could potentially come back to the HRA, or perhaps the housing company would like to take an extended lease of those properties. So it's just important to note that even though they come from the HRA and the General Fund, they remain the asset of either of those appropriate accounts. Thank you. Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Colleagues, are there any other questions that people have on this paper and the proposal that's in front of us today? Is there any debate? Oh, Councillor Power.
Thank you, Leader. If I may offer some reassurance to Councillor Horrell, the robust both of the housing company itself and the effect on the HRA and the effect on the general fund has been examined upside, downside and sideways to assess the impact on each of those risks, because they are risks. We are very much aware of also the risk to resources within the HRA of taking on the housing company. And I think we will continue to be vigilant, as officers already are. And if that offers some reassurance, Leader, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Power. Councillor Gordon-Smith.
Well, one thing I learned from the briefing we had for Central Winchester and the future of economics, property economics in the area, was how the supply of private landlord rented property is declining quite markedly for various reasons. And also people who are continuing to rent private properties are very hard hit, not only with the problems with inflation and energy, but also with the fact that rents are jumping up at a great rate. And I think this has a severe impact, and having the security and stability of a long-term rental agreement does wonders for society. You don't have to listen to the news very long to hear about people who've various other parts of the country who've been rented private houses suddenly find under the new tenancy laws, despite the fact they've paid the rent and been model tenants, they're out. And I think there's huge economic benefits to allowing the sort of social mobility of having rented houses, allowing people to move into the area and also to move out when it suits them, rather than having to buy and sell houses. So I'm very much in support of this.
Oh, thank you very much indeed, Councillor Gordon-Smith. Councillor Becker.
Oh, it is working. There we go. Thank you, Leader, and thank you, officers, for all the effort and time I know you've spent on this project over so many years. I recall a meeting back at the Winnell Flats in, must have been 2018 or 20, I think I had baby in tow, so I think it was early 2019 where we started talking to them about what was proposed for the site. So I'm really happy about the establishment of the company, and equally happy that we're going to start with these new properties at Winnell, which are looking lovely. Speaking as a local resident and as ward councillor for Winnell, I know the number of people that we speak to regularly who say they just can't find rented accommodation in Winchester, particularly rented accommodation where you can walk into town or you can get a bus into town. And the number of professionals and teachers, or more likely the families of teachers and professionals, teachers, nurses, that type of professional who say, you know, their children have graduated, but they just can't move back to Winchester because there's no accommodation. This offers options for them to come back, to establish their careers, to start building their lives here again, and then moving on into bigger properties, starting families, and hopefully living the rest of their lives here as well. So thank you for that. And just to say again, I know Councillor Ferguson already raised it, we did make a promise back in those very early days that we would be offering a wider variety of tenures at Winnell. So I'm very, very pleased to see that we're able to do that.
Thank you. Any other Cabinet members wish to comment? Oh, Councillor Lerney.
Thank you. I wanted to support what Councillor Becker has just said. There is a real shortage of quality rental property in Winchester, particularly for those young professionals or people joining the key services in the area. But joining the housing register is not an appropriate approach for many of them. They can't necessarily commit to spending their entire rest of their lives in Winchester. and that long-term rental isn't always right and doesn't necessarily give them the choice about where they need to live that they want either. I really welcome the housing company approach, particularly because we've chosen actually a very low-risk way of providing this accommodation. In the event that there was a housing rental crash or whatever, there is the potential for this to fall back into the HRA or back into the general fund, depending on what happens, which is very welcome because, as we know, a lot of councils have been caught out with property investments, but this is a really sensible way forward. We have made a commitment to providing homes for all, and I think this is an appropriate and very sensible way forward.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Lerney. Councillor Ferguson, do you have any final comments?
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Cabinet colleagues, for your support. Really just to say that I'd like to thank the officers Dick Johnson, Simon Maggs and Gillian Knight, and Richard Botham, who's no longer with us, but I'm sure he'd be very pleased today to see this paper come forward to Cabinet. And I think it will give us that vehicle that we need to offer a different tenure, and also importantly, to actually make a difference to people's lives. The new flats that are going up at Winnall, they are very highly well designed. Every piece of space has been well used. They're going to be very, very energy efficient. And someone who moves into them, I'm sure, will be very happy to have such a high quality new home and know that if all goes well, and if they want to, they can stay there and renew their tenancy agreement on an annual basis. But equally, if they want to move on or their circumstances change, they'll be able to do that too. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, I also strongly support this. It's very good that we're moving this proposal ahead, that we're making some choices today that will choices and decisions today that will help progress this project and mean that we're on track to deliver and make these great new flats that we're currently in the process of building available to residents. There is a gap in what's on offer within Winchester. It's a sort of recognised phenomenon that as soon as you get below the big cities, professionally managed market rate housing doesn't really exist in the way that does in other cities. We have some of it. We see it with some student housing is managed on that kind of basis, but what we don't have is that wider offer that goes beyond students and ensures that people know that they, and I think there's something that we can bring to that as a local authority, which will go beyond possibly even what might happen with a professional private sector landlord in this particular case. We have the experience of and the services to professionally manage buildings and tenancies, which not everybody has access to. We are not going to go away. We are committed to providing housing for the long term. There's no danger that we're going to ask, your auntie wants to move back into it, or you need to sell it for your own personal and completely valid financial reasons. None of that's going to happen in this particular case. This is something we're committed to for the long term, and having this as part of our armoury as a council to ensure that that there is the right offer of housing to people starting here in Winnall, but hopefully in the longer term right across the district, is a very exciting opportunity. But I also like the way in which it's being done in a prudent and thought through way, recognising that we're not going to charge into this at scale. We're going to learn as we go, starting with a very well thought through proposal, which is the one that is going to be worked up in detail for as our first piece of implementation. So the recommendations in front of us are to firstly note the business case and support the principle of establishing a new local housing company which can lease from the council and manage residential properties held in the HRA, the Housing Revenue Account, or the General Fund. There will be a business case on each of those, obviously, before we do them. In this particular case, provide high quality, energy efficient council-owned housing as rented homes, an alternative to our current housing offer. And I would stress our commitment to the provision of affordable council houses remains absolutely undimmed. This is a supplement. This is something extra. It is not a replacement for our ambition, which still remains in place and which indeed we've just agreed within our council plan to build 1,000 new council houses and to continue building that, have that council and other affordable housing option available to people, and to lease, take this opportunity that we have with the accommodation in Winnell to lease that. So that's the first block that we need to agree. The second one is asking the corporate head of housing to develop detailed proposals to bring back to Cabinet, agreeing that this is the new model. We're replacing what was in previous Cabinet papers in terms of how we were going to develop a housing company, and then also authorising the head of asset management to make a non-material amendment to the local planning authority, which is also us, but obviously we have barriers and careful controls in terms of how that's managed to change the description of development to delete reference to sub-market rent in relation to the accommodation currently being developed at Winnell. So those are the 4 recommendations in front of us. Cabinet, we agreed to those recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to the next paper, which is the tree strategy paper, I believe we have Sue Robbins and Ivan Girdler. Are you coming forward for this, or is it at the table? Ivan's coming forward. And sorry, I don't. Right. Thank you very much indeed for coming forward. This is a great paper. I love this paper. Probably not meant to say that from the chair. Councillor Lerney, tell me why we should support this paper.
Thank you, Chairman. You should support this paper because trees are incredibly important to our residents. They strongly value the visual amenity, the impact on air temperature and air quality, and the health and well-being impacts of both rural and urban trees. As a council, we've made commitments through the Carbon Neutrality Action Plan, the Biodiversity Action Plan, and indeed our council plan to look after our existing woodlands and trees and expand tree coverage. The strategy sets out how we will do that not only on our own land, but where we have regulatory power or influence over others. It takes many years for trees to reach the point where they reach a carbon positive position, and looking after our existing trees is of paramount importance. In this, we do face considerable challenges at the moment. Ash dieback will devastate many local areas of woodland, including some owned by the council. Climate change is putting particular varieties of trees under extreme stress and allowing formerly rare tree pests and diseases to thrive. The strategy sets out an approach where only essential works are undertaken to existing trees and careful consideration is given to where we plant and what we plant to maximise biodiversity, carbon capture and the resilience of our wooded areas. While the tree strategy sets out formally how and why we will manage trees in our district, the additional budget that's been proposed is associated not with changes in management practice, but the basic work of ensuring our trees are safe and that we're meeting our legal requirements. We do have an increase in the amount of essential tree work that needs to be undertaken, and inflation has increased the cost of what needs to be done. The Winchester Town Forum has already considered and approved the applicable recommendations to them, and I'm very pleased to bring this strategy forward for approval and would recommend that we do undertake the extra spending associated with it.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Wallace, I believe you wanted to say a few words on this paper or ask some questions. Make a deputation. Fire away.
Thank you, Chair. Tree strategy being presented today establishes a set of policies by which the council will manage its tree stock and its statutory function in relation to trees. In other words, it's a strategy for management of trees, which the council is responsible, and as such, it's an important and useful document. However, alongside this strategy and as part of the council's climate emergency response, it is important for the council to develop a strategy around tree planting. As the effects of climate crisis become more pronounced, the role of trees in helping us to mitigate the impacts of climate change become increasingly important, not only to sequester carbon, but also to mitigate some of the more extreme impacts that we are experiencing in our weather. Trees can be used to help shade the city from extreme heat and to absorb water from extreme rainfall. And therefore, the strategy should cover not only the number of trees to be planted in the district each year, but also guidance on the types and locations of those trees, from car parks to city streets. Moreover, the tree planting strategy should include both trees that are the direct responsibility of the council, plus trees that the council has influence over. For example, tree planting that happens as part of a planning application. Tree planting is an opportunity for Winchester Council to drive positive improvements across our district that will benefit residents today and into the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Ernie, any comments on the points raised?
I will pass over to officers, but I do think it is important to emphasise that the carbon impact of trees takes a considerable period of time before it comes forward. In terms of the action we can take most urgently to reduce carbon, I think we have to think quite hard about the priorities. At the same time, we are committed to looking at increasing tree coverage within the district. And we certainly welcome initiatives, for example, by the county in this area, and we need to discuss with them how that will meld with our own plans. I think at the moment, we have limited capacity in this work, and looking after our existing trees, as I said, is of paramount importance. I'd appreciate a comment from officers on this.
Yes, I'd like to pick up on about the plan application. We do use planning conditions to ensure replacement trees are put in. So that is used where it is. Also, we are very conscious right tree in the right place. So making sure that you're looking at a long-term effect of that tree. A diverse stock of different ages and species to combat pest and disease. We don't know what's coming in the country. There's always something new going on. So we want to make sure we've got different size trees, different stocks to combat that issue. And tree planting is ongoing basis to boost our stock and to replace the trees that have lost through storms or vandalism, or just sometimes trees just die because they get old and die.
Thank you. So it's Rick Smith. I'm Natural Environment Team Manager, just for those of you who didn't know. Just really to echo what Councillor Lerney said, the tree strategy is primarily looking at our long-term management of our tree stock. So it is that we're focused on. It's something that we've been doing, obviously, for a long time, but this really just goes down into the detail on how we do manage that, what we need to do. The really pressing issues of ash dieback are something that we're dealing with right now, but we're very aware that we've had other issues, other diseases, other pests and things. Phytophthora was one which came in before. It's ash dieback now. There's lots of other things that would potentially come. So it's having that resilience long term, which the strategy provides us with the way of going about that. On the sort of the bigger issue then of the tree planting, I think it's been mentioned already that it's covered under other strategies as well. So carbon neutrality action plan does cover tree planting, as does the biodiversity action plan, and all of those sort of things filter down into our team, natural environment team's work programme. So it does filter down into that sort of work. And I think it's also worth mentioning, even though it's not tree strategy, the carbon neutrality action plan and the carbon sequestration comes under other ways of doing this other than just tree planting. So our wildflower and grassland planting and creation is another way that we do to implement that sort of work. So yeah, that comes under the biodiversity action plan as well as things like that.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Smith, and apologies for name checking you earlier. And I do appreciate you coming forward to the table. Colleagues, are there any other questions that they wish to raise? Councillor Power.
Thank you, Leader. I'm afraid I do have a couple of questions. I'd like to know if you have the resources within this tree strategy to monitor the aftercare requirements when new trees are planted as part of a planning approval. Because as we know, it's the aftercare that costs the money. And my second question is, will this budget cover the cost of extracting the ash where felling is no longer appropriate? It's a common problem in my ward where we have or did have an awful lot of ash trees, and the cost on landowners is draconian, I think is the best way of describing it. Thank you.
I'll just start off, then Ivan might want to add a few comments. So the resources for aftercare following with planning related tree planting, it definitely, the aftercare, you're quite right, is where the huge amounts of the costs come in. We know that watering is a really big one, especially when we have years like we have. So the thing with the planning is that we can have that, we can condition those sort of things in. So we do that already. We have, as part of conditioned strategies for the landscaping, the trees have to survive. So if they don't, they can be replaced. We don't really want that approach of replacing them. We'd rather that they were watered and maintained in the right place. So that's the sort of thing that we build into conditions. And so our tree officers make sure that that's conditioned, as well as our landscape officers and ecologists build that sort of thing into the conditions. And on the extraction of the ash, I mean, I think it's a very a site-by-site sort of based problem, really. But I do get it that sometimes it's not viable financially for the contractors to easily take that out. So we have to work, and Ivan will probably be able to add some detail on this, but we have to work with them to get the best strategy of extraction. If the timber's if it's still worthwhile as a timber, then great, that might help. But there's other things we can do as well as extracting, as we can use the wood for other resources within the woodland. So actually leaving standing dead wood within a woodland is really, really valuable. So you might see some sort of monoliths within a woodland that's dead or dying. You can see like woodpecker holes and things. Really great value for biodiversity, as well as biodiversity and log piles, which are stacked up and rot down, and they provide a huge amount for biodiversity. So there's sort of it's probably that we'll look at a bit of a mixed approach to that going forward.
I'd just say that we'd evaluate the cost of mechanical removal over the cost by hand. So what we're doing at St Giles Hill, because it's so hilly that you can't get machinery in there. So we look at what the cost is to extract by machine, and then work out how many trees we can remove by hand, by either smaller machines or by hand, and work out a program of how long that would take, and also the risks. So where the trees are higher risk near footpaths, obviously we've got to do some of them, but stuff that's sitting further back, there's risk. So we're looking at costs of how we can make it better, not cheaper, more commonly, sort of making sure that we can get the best value for it, because we do know that that some of the areas we've got to are really difficult to access and expensive if we start using them. Also the damage that's left. You've got skid trees out, you're breaking up the grass surfaces, damaging the flowers, it's dangerous for the members of the public, it's breaking up footpath steps. So all that has to be taken into account of extraction costs. So we are working on that at the moment. Hopefully we can get that sorted out in the future.
Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you. Thank you, Leader. And I spoke at Town Forum about how delighted I was to see this tree strategy come forward, and the amount of care and concern we take for our trees. Just in terms of the additional costs, I know that we've talked about there's been an uplift in costs just because of inflationary pressures, which is true for all of the council services. We face that challenge, that substantial challenge. I just wondered, to what proportion, if you're able to, or even to give an indication, is because of the need to deal with the ash dieback? What proportion is the need to deal with the general management of the trees? And on top of that, during last year's storms, we saw a substantial number of trees come down and damage properties as well. I just wondered, from your experience, to what extent do we have, again, that exposure where some of our trees are are not in good shape, or is generally our tree stock in good shape and could weather another storm, Eunice? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ferguson. Yeah, I think on the resources and the uplift, I think that with the proportions, I wouldn't be able to say exactly, but I think the ash dieback has been basically, we've known about it for probably over 10 years, and it's slowly moved through the country, and it's become apparent across the country. And now we're sort of dealing with it because it's become, the risk is raised as it's hit more mature trees, especially ones where we've got more public access and so on. I don't think I wouldn't be able to say that what the sort of split is taking that forward. We could have a look, and sort of look at the amount of work which is ash dieback. But taking the example of St Giles Hill, all the work we're doing there is the emergency work related to ash. So and the tree strategy goes through that. The emergency work is done straight away. Contractors come out and does that. Then you've got the next level of work, which isn't emergency, but it's our priority for that year. So this winter. So I think we just build that into it as we go. Generally, I think the good thing is that this is accounting for it for the future as well now. So we know that this has slowly been building. We know that we're dealing with ash on all of our sites. The emergency work will be done, and then the sort of monitoring and progressing, if it needs to come back to it in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years' time, is really key. And that's why the tree surveyor post and the approval of that is absolutely essential, because some of them, they're not emergency trees. They'll be monitored. They'll see how they develop over time. So it's looking at that, and the resource is key. So I'm sorry, I'm not able to give you a clear answer on that split, but I don't know if Ivan.
What we actually use is the EasyTree software, which actually programs in future work. So we can, say that next year these trees will need to be felled or lifted, whatever it needs doing. But the important to keep the record of that we've inspected them, but also we can future plan them. But based on, you talked about Storm Eunice, is that the trees are inspected on normal conditions. You can't really predict what's going to happen in a storm. Tree depends on the condition, the direction of the wind. So normal tree inspections on normal weather patterns and sort of known conditions. So you can't predict what's going to happen in a storm. So you go from there. But the beauty is that as the tree survey progresses, we can actually know what we've got there, so we know how to manage things, plan to manage things, and know what we've got there. And that was part of the aims of the tree survey, is to find out what the condition of the stock is. And once you know the condition of the stock, we can then work out how we're going to manage that stock, because although our policy says that high risk trees once every 3 years, medium risk every 5 years, and low risk not at all, is that some of them trees may need more inspection every 18 months because they're next to a road or next to the railway condition, and you need to monitor the health of the tree, work out how you're going to manage that tree. But so we have them targets and them sort of objectives, but sometimes we have to do more than that, so because of the tree and where it is.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other questions? I have a quick question, which is there was mention made about, there's a lot in here about how we protect trees that have been put in through the planning system and TPOs and the like. And I just wondered, we're working on a local plan at the moment. There are some policies in there about trees. Presumably your team has been involved in defining those policies, and you're broadly happy with them, and they're consistent with what's in here?
Yes,
that would be my question.
We are involved with that, the plans, and talking to the planning for that. But one of the things also this tree strategy sets out the planning side as well. So it's like a manual for developers to say that this is what the expectations of the council are when you're submitting a plan application. It's laid in there that, you know, that we expect fencing, we expect an arboriculture impact assessment, arboriculture method statement. So it's sort of, again, a manual for, you know, not just for how we manage our trees, but how we've got regulatory obligations or commitments or duties that we say this is what we need you to do. So that's in here as well. So anybody who's sort of thinking, oh, I'm going to build a house, I've got a tree in the garden, what do I do? If they go to this strategy, it tells them exactly what they need to do to stay compliant with the One App requirements of the planning side of things.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much indeed. Is there any debate? Oh, is that a question or debate? Councillor Gordon-Smith, or both?
A bit of both, I think. I think it's wonderful to have this clarification, and trees make such an enormous effect to our lives visually and with the environment. And we can see that trees are becoming very, very much more stressed by long, dry summers, very wet winters, and in a way, this cold spell at the moment is a bit of a blessing, and hopefully it'll knock the oak processional moth down a bit. But I'm just wondering, given these climatic changes that are going to probably accelerate, whether we can think about future tree species. And we think like beech trees at the moment, they have a sort of upper limit in Scotland, in parts of Scotland. But obviously that might, you know, as the climate changes, different tolerances are needed. And wonder, any thoughts been given to that?
Yes, we have. One of the thoughts we're thinking is that, you know, the way the climate's going, 20 years' time, the trees that we've got growing in this country may not survive. You've got to be looking at what's growing in the Mediterranean at the moment. So, you know, we are conscious that, as you say, like beech, palms of beech, you know, some scorch and that sort of stuff, pines, oaks. So, again, it goes back to the right tree in the right place, think about long-term future, what's going to happen. So yes, we are aware of that, and we are thinking about that. Also, you say about the oak processioning moth. We know that's in Romsey at the moment, Ampfield. That's on our doorstep. So we're also working with the Forestry Commission, monitoring what's happening to that. And again, with future tree planting, it depends on what the nurseries are growing, what we can get available through them, through Hilliers, you know, using local trees. So yeah, so there are lots of things we are thinking about. We're watching, monitoring, thinking about what we're going to do. Team chats about it, you know, sort of what we're going to do. So yeah, so we are quite aware of what's going on in the tree world and what our future commitments are.
I just add in a couple of comments there as well. Yeah, I think the sort of at the core of the strategy, I think, is sort of resilience of the tree stock, and that means the diversity. So in species, age range, and so on as well is really key. And Ivan's already mentioned that sort of local provenance, right tree in the right place. And we've sort of got the example as well as processionary moth. But we've got the example of where we're losing all this ash now. We're actually now beginning to realise the value of things like sycamore, which maybe 5-10 years ago we were taking out self-seeded sycamore everywhere as a bit of a weed. So sycamore's regarded a bit differently now, and it's bumped up on the hierarchy a little bit, and I think that it just reflects the climate change and how we change.
Could I just add to that we are now actually planting elm-resistant elms that Hilliers have grown on. So we're now planting elms because they're a long-lived tree, a very good hardwood. So you know, sort of trying to sort of put back the elm stock that was lost in the 70s, and we are still losing them. But you know, so we are. You know, so in hopefully years to come, Hilliers will, you know, develop a ash dieback tree, ash. So hopefully we'll be able to plant them in the future. But yeah, at the moment we're taking advantage of their, you know, stock, and we're planting them because elms. This is a good place to plant elms.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful to see elm trees back in the landscape, striding along hedgerows.
Any other debate? Councillor Power.
Thank you, Chairman. I got very excited about this paper as well. The only problem with elms is that the ones we've planted in Alresford are on Ash Close, which which does cause a slight confusion.
Yeah.
In response to Councillor Wallace's point, we have had some success in my ward in finding foster parents for new trees. Now, the success of that will not be proven until after 3 years, but I think there is a role for local councillors in finding people who want trees and saying, would you be willing to water them for 3 years? And those plantings have been both on county and Winchester land. Again, I don't want to claim a success until those trees are established, but I think there is potential for resident engagement in fostering new trees. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, just a few comments. Very much welcome the paper. I did make a few comments at Town Forum on it. Completely support what Councillor Powers just said about engaging with local residents where there has been tree planting and encouraging them to maintain them through watering and generally just keeping an eye on them. Very pleased to hear about the replacement or the replanting of elms. In my childhood home, we had a number of elms in the allotment or around the perimeters of the allotment that was at the bottom of the garden. And I do remember when they went, and it was quite memorable event and quite sad at the time. So very pleased to hear that. So pleased to support the paper, and also very pleased that it sets out guidelines for developers on the way forward, because all developments normally involve planting of some sort or another. So that I think that's really helpful. Thank you.
Great. Any other? Councillor Ferguson, who wants to go first?
I'll be brief, Leader. I just want to say I also support this paper, because not only does it set out very clearly how much we value our existing trees and how important we see trees are for the future, but it also shows how thoroughly we think about how we manage those trees and secure their long-term future. So I'm very, very, very happy to support the paper and the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Becker.
Also very happy to support the paper. I said it at Town Forum and I'll say it again. I live in a place where I can physically see the effects of the work that you do, the monitoring that you do of for me, the willow trees along Water Lane. I live on Water Lane. I look out of my window, I see the beautiful trees every morning, and I see Ivan and the team. They're looking to check the quality of those trees, check the health of those trees, doing the pollarding to make sure that they stay healthy and safe. And I see them in the water when a branch inevitably comes down and risks City Mill, and they are there within 20 minutes to clean it up and to make sure it's safe. And anyone walking along, you wouldn't even realise that it had happened an hour later. So I just wanted to say publicly again, thank you very much, and I will, of course, be supporting the paper.
Brilliant. Councillor Lerney, any final comments?
No, just to thank colleagues for their support, and also to thank the officers for the really good work that they do in this area. And I think the other comments we've heard are a testament to the good job that they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lerney, and I would share your views. I think it's a good opportunity to. I mean, first of all, I would support all the comments. This is an excellent paper, and the sort of the detail and care that has gone into it is greatly appreciated. And thank you for answering all the questions we have here today. And I think the detail and care that's gone into the paper also reflects the care and commitment that the team, Ivan and his colleagues, have to the trees in our district. I mean, it's one of the things that I often say to people, which is, never underestimate how much local government benefits from officers whose personal commitment to what they're doing and belief in what they're doing goes far beyond anything that we might ever say as councillors in terms of setting direction, and has a truly special effect on on the place that we all live in, both the urban place and the rural place. The countryside, our cities. You know, one of the things that characterises Winchester as you go around is the trees, and very often when talk to Mr. Girdler, he will tell you about, you know, how all the trees on Chilbolton Avenue he personally put in there, and it is greatly appreciated. You know, we talk a lot about architecture when we're as a city and as a district, but actually that's not the only thing that makes our area special, and it is the work of council officers. And this paper is just one aspect of that, which makes all the difference and really makes this a special place to live in. So we're very grateful for all your work. Of course, I think as Cabinet, we will be supporting the paper today, but I do need to formally go through the steps towards getting that in place. So we have a recommendation in front of us, Cabinet, to approve the City Council tree strategy. Unfortunately, it's not really appropriate to add the word enthusiastically, but I think you can take it as read. We have to approve a budget overspend in 22-23 to be funded from the general fund, and additional budget requirement from 23-24 onwards, also from the general fund, and a tree surveyor placed from 24-25. So those are the recommendations in front of us. Cabinet, are you enthusiastically agreed? Agreed. Good. I'm very pleased to hear it. And thank you very much indeed, Mr. Smith, Mr. Girdler, both for your work and for this paper. It's greatly appreciated. The next paper is one that I need to introduce, which is the Community Infrastructure Levy funding for St Clement's Surgery Public Realm Works. Councillor Porter was going to be here, but as mentioned earlier, has given her apologies. And I'm very pleased that we have Ms Phillips here to talk through or to be able to take any questions or comments on the paper. So the purpose of this report is that we agree some funding from district CIL receipts. So this is the CIL Community Infrastructure Levy, is the money that was collected from on new development in order to support infrastructure to deal with the pressures of that development, and its work on the highway at Upper Brook Street in Winchester. It relates to a site that we own that is being developed, and it relates to the development of a healthcare facility placing the existing St Clement's Surgery. So it ticks a lot of strategic boxes. It's consistent with what we're also trying to do on a wider level with the City of Winchester Movement Strategy, and our priorities of making the public realm better for walkers and cyclists. And again, in order to manage the growing population in the city, we don't just need better facilities for GPs, we also need to make sure that the extra movement that generates is happening in a more sustainable way, and this will help with that. So that's the paper in front of us. We have, I think, 2 deputations to be made on this one. Councillor Horrell, do you want to say something on this one? If you could come forward, thank you very much indeed.
Chair, thank you for allowing me to address Cabinet again this morning. I believe we are all agreed on the following. The health and well-being of our residents is a key objective. That the current St Clement's Surgery is not fit for purpose and does not meet appropriate specifications. That we as a council made a commitment in 2017 to rebuild the St Clement's Surgery. But here we are in 2022, still waiting for a new building. Why is it then today that this paper says very overtly in 12.2, and if I may quote, Chair, that the £100,000 contribution towards public realm works was considered as to not being provided and rejected because it would jeopardise the developer's ability to deliver this important primary healthcare facility. So, Chair, are we being held to ransom by the developer that if we do not provide the SIL quantity of money, that the development will not go ahead? Why do we find ourselves in this cleft stick today when we're all so committed to the overall objective of a new surgery? How are we held to ransom in this way that the project cannot proceed unless the £100,000 is given to the developer? Chair, I find it extraordinary that we should be in this position. I understand we have funds, so that is not the issue. But for something that we're also universally in support of, it seems unbelievable that we have this paper with that level of disappointment if we were to not agree the sum today. And that the paper further advises us that the developers had to value engineer the scheme to maintain its development, and that the viability is marginal, and that therefore this sum is crucial. I think there are some questions to answer, Chair. I didn't hear them in your introduction of the paper, and I'd be grateful for a response. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Horrell. You will indeed get one. Councillor Wallace, you wanted to make a comment or two?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. But what Councillor Horrell said, no one doubts the need for a new surgery in central Winchester. The old building's in a poor state of repair and new premises are needed as soon as possible. Do need to be careful how the funding is applied. Healthcare facilities, including GP surgeries, are increasingly made up of a mix of both public bodies and commercial parties. The development of St Clement's Surgery is being led by a commercial company who are funding the development because they anticipate making a profit from renting the surgery to the NHS. Further funding is needed for the development, and then there are alternate means for getting funding. That funding comes as a loan from within the NHS organisation to be repaid over time. The purpose of SIL funding is to help deliver the infrastructure needed to support development in an area. Care must be taken that it's not used to directly fund the development.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Wallace. And of course, it isn't being used to fund the development. And coming back to the point made by Councillor Horrell, the government's catastrophic management of the economy has increased costs for most developers. We've seen that on a lot of projects. We're having to, within our own developments, having to value engineer everything in sight. And as we saw at the last Cabinet meeting, also have to provide extra funding, for example, to complete the King George V pavilions, reflecting the fact that construction costs are out of control, partly through a cack-handed implementation of Brexit, which has affected the labour force, partly through cack-handed management of the economy, which has affected the interest rates. But I'm sure there are other more balanced views that can be given on this. Mrs. Adey, you have some views or can provide some insight on the points raised.
Thank you, Leader. The reason we're here with this paper today does refer to the points you've just made, if I can reiterate them. The difference between 2017 and 2022 and how we find ourselves financially at the moment is vast. And as you say, with our own projects, we're finding that we're re-engineering and reprofiling and repricing them. And that's exactly what's happened with this development. And we found ourselves at the table with the developers holding discussions about whether this development could go forwards or not. Still, is available to fund this type of development. We've specifically said it's to fund the public realm around the development to make sure that that's in keeping with our high street and to make sure that that delivers the area around the surgery to the quality and standard that we're looking for as a council. So I confidently recommend this to you today.
Thank you very much indeed. And just for a sort of follow-up question, it is only a small proportion of the extra cost that's being talked about. And what makes one of the things that is different and why, it is different about this is that perhaps, as Councillor Wallace talked about, it is a hybrid of publicly owned land, a publicly owned tenant, and a specialist developer who has experience in developing these buildings in a cost-effective way that also meets the needs of the emerging needs of the health system. Are there any other questions from Cabinet colleagues? Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a patient of St Clement's and have been since still almost years ago, and I am desperate for a new surgery as a patient. I think it's astonishing the conditions in which the doctors have to operate, and not least in the terms of the climate emergency, that building isn't fit for purpose. The wind whips through the windows. So I'm really keen that we actually do get this surgery built. In some ways, the question of whether a private developer is building it or not perhaps is less of an issue in that is often how surgeries are now built. So, that's something we have to consider. Just on the SIL money, and I think you've just, the contribution you've just made is, when we talk about the public realm, my understanding is it's specifically to look at the pavement, to make sure that people who want to walk to the surgery can get there safely, and that there is space also for people to potentially drop off or pick up as well. This surgery is the only one in the centre of town, and it has a huge patient base. And it's the one where people do use the bus and they do walk to that surgery. So if you could just clarify, you said public realm, but is it to do with the pavement or is it to do with drop-off? Thank you.
Thank you. The public realm around this building includes a drop-in, a drop-off point, and continues around the corner and includes the width of the pavement, as you say, through around the side of the building as well. So the request for this funding goes towards the public realm. So we can't say we're funding a specific part of it. It's a contribution towards making sure that public realm is not only fit for purpose, but meets our needs in that part of the high street. So you're absolutely right. It's to provide safe access, safe drop-off, but also of the right quality that it needs to be.
Sorry, a further question for clarification, which is, and it isn't just about the surgery either. I mean, there is public benefit, and it's part of the design to make sure that there's a benefit and it's better for the businesses that are along there as well. And we know also the public realm in general, that's an important thoroughfare, for example, for the people who live in Upper Brook Street, no less. But also that's the way I think that leads through to often used to access. One of the ways people use to access St Peter's car park, for example, and it's one of the ways that people who are heading out towards River Park will use. So actually making sure that there's proper public benefit, not just for the surgery, but also for the businesses in the area is going to be important. Is that fair?
That's absolutely fair summarisation, yes.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other questions from colleagues? Any debate? Councillor Power.
Thank you, Leader. I'm surprised you didn't refer to the cack-handed funding of GP services, which has led to a lack of service throughout the country. I'm sure you would have. We'll get to it eventually. SIL is there to fund infrastructure because of an increase in the population and the increase in local housing. Therefore, I have no hesitation whatsoever in supporting these recommendations.
Thank you very much indeed. And I absolutely take your point in terms of funding of GP surgeries services, although actually talking to GPs in other parts of the district, one of the biggest barriers they have in being able to treat and deal with as many people as they want is the quality of the buildings that they're in. And we make no apology as a council for using our position as a landowner and a planning authority to see how we can work with GP colleagues and NHS colleagues to tackle the pressures that they're under. Any other debate, comment? Councillor Lerney.
Thank you. I think this is an important step forward in unlocking what is actually a key development for Winchester. This is obviously partly around providing excellent new medical facilities, but also about enabling in the future redevelopment of the existing site in central Winchester, which we all know the existing surgery is a total eyesore. It's dreadful to be in, and it's dreadful to be outside of as well. So this is a good move forward. I mean, I think we all understand that the recent rise in construction costs has not been matched by concomitant rises in NHS funds to cover new buildings. So I think it was inevitable that we were going to have to have a re-look at the finances around this building. While we are in effect outsourcing this development to a private developer, which was not originally the intention, having been involved with the process, it was an extremely good move to make. The developer is an expert in these kind of developments, and I think when we entered into the original plans for the council to build the surgery, we had absolutely no idea of how complicated the issue is. For example, when you put a sink into a medical facility, it doesn't have a trap in it. Who would know that without the detailed knowledge that you need to make all of those specification choices? Units come in standard sizes, which are not the same as kitchen sizes, and you need to design rooms with those kind of things in mind. So having an expert developer in this field involved is, I think, a really good thing for us to have done. And I certainly know that the doctors have appreciated having somebody to work with who understands all the issues around this. So I'm very keen to support this. Let's unlock the development and enable a great new facility for Winchester.
Thank you, Councillor Lerney. I'm not seeing any other hands. I think one other thing I would say is they also know how money works within the NHS, and there was a comment made earlier about could we get a loan from the NHS. The difficulty of getting capital spending and any kind of commitment out of the NHS Property Services is legendary in terms of how difficult it is and how complicated it is, and actually having somebody who can work with the GPs and ourselves to navigate that process has also been incredibly helpful. So, colleagues, we have the recommendation in front of us. The recommendation is that Cabinet approve budget and expenditure of a capital grant of £100,000 to be funded from district SIL receipts for the public realm improvements associated with the construction of a new surgery and primary healthcare facility on Upper Brook Street, Winchester, but also to provide wider benefits for businesses in the area and for pedestrian movements around the city centre. Are you agreed?
Agreed.
And thank you very much indeed, Ms. Phillips, for coming forward to the table. I'm sorry we didn't pepper you with questions about the details of the SIL scheme, but I think the debate moved in a somewhat different direction. But thank you very much indeed also for all the work you did to pull this paper together, and indeed all the work that you do to support the Community Infrastructure Levy programme ongoing. It's much appreciated. Moving on to item 12, which is the Pride in Place monitoring arrangements and provision. I think we originally thought in terms of describing this as about CCTV, but in practice it plays an important role with pub watch and shop watch and other things that are going on in the district as well. So, Mr. Hickman, very pleased to see you come to the table. Councillor Lerney, another one for you.
Thank you, Leader. As covered in the item on the council plan earlier, this administration is committed to an increased focus on pride in place, with our residents able to enjoy attractive public spaces where they feel safe and secure. An important aspect of community safety is clearly the reduction of antisocial behaviour and crime through effective monitoring, deterring bad behaviour, enabling timely intervention, and providing the evidence to take legal action when required. CCTV is an important part of those monitoring efforts and supports other areas of our work, such as parking, action on fly tipping, and out-of-hours emergencies, as well as supporting our partners, both the police in terms of evidence gathering and pointing them into in the right directions, and also the Business Improvement District with their pub and shop watch work. We do already own the CCTV hardware and software and are in the process of upgrading this to a higher quality system with greater capacity. Councillors and our residents are, of course, aware that the public sector as a whole is in financial difficulty, and we did, of course, when we were thinking about the future of our TV monitoring service, have to consider cutting costs by, for example, having a recording-only system, a reduction in the hours of monitoring, or a remote monitoring service. Our view is that none of these options would give the level of service that our residents want and deserve, and this would be inappropriate at a time when, with our partners, we're fighting antisocial behaviour so hard. We do, however, need the flexibility to achieve financial efficiencies either through service cuts or sharing the service with others, and we are proposing that we move forward with a flexible contract which allows those possibilities in future. So with that brief introduction, Leader, I'm happy to take any questions and comments about the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Lerney. First, we have a deputation from Councillor Horrell on this paper.
Chair, thank you. And I am very pleased to see that we intend to continue to provide the monitoring of the CCTV equipment that we have. And we know that the district, particularly the city, has seen to be a safe location. And part of that is the approach that we are taking. So you have our support in that. The question I have, Chair, is one about partnership working. On page 174 of the report, there is reference to working with other authorities who also have the same issue that we have. And it's not clear to me why some of those quite important advantages did not were put to one side, and why we decided not to work with other authorities who will have, as I say, the same issues and the same concerns for cost and the same understanding that we're all trying to achieve. And I'm just slightly surprised that we haven't made further efforts there, and I'd appreciate a better understanding of those conversations that took place. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Lerney.
Thank you. I'll pass over to Mr. Hickman to deal with the issue of other local authorities. I think it's important that when we talk about other partners, then we're not just potentially talking about other district local authorities. Then we are talking about parish councils who may desire for us to provide them with the service. And I think it's important that we have a service which has the flexibility that we need to have a look at all of these issues. But I would say that, in a sense, you know, we are improving our service at the moment, and we do need to move forward with a new monitoring contract, whatever form that takes. From experience, including the merger, for example, of our IT services with this council and Test Valley. Those kind of arrangements take a very long period of time to put into place and always turn out to be much more complicated than you think they will be. But I'll pass over to Mr. Hickman for that.
Yes, I think that's right. We've had some sort of brief discussions with other councils, and they've got different systems, different approaches, different requirements. In the past, we had a very detailed discussion with one nearby local authority, and we very nearly did enter into a contract, but at the last minute, they decided they wanted to retain and local control and independence of their system. But what we're doing is we will look at this further, and any contract that we enter into, we'll make sure there's flexibility in that contract so we can vary it to bring other partners in and take on additional work. So it will be built into our work going forward, and we do intend to do that.
Thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, any other questions on this paper? Councillor Lerney, there's no real point in asking you to comment on your own comments. Do you want to comment on your own comments?
That's fine, thank you, Leader.
No, this is effectively thank you very much indeed. This is effectively shall we say, an enabling decision that we do today that enables us to put in place the infrastructure and have a formal contract in place that enables us to manage our CCTV more effectively. I think it's important that we do talk about it in this paper as something wider. We use the fact that we have people in a control room who can coordinate a lot of other activities that are going on, and any of us who've been out with the police or with street pastors or has spoken to shop watch or pub watch will know that it isn't just about looking at screens. I know that CCTV has also played an important role in the work that we've been doing to tackle problems of antisocial behaviour and vandalism. So this is a really important contract for us. I'm pleased that the management questions and the other elements that we've talked about today are highlighted. So, colleagues, we have 4 recommendations. The first is to appoint a new monitoring service contractor for 5 years, subject to the existing budget of £240,000 for 23-24. Second is to delegate to the head of programme place and the service lead for legal in consultation with the cabinet member for the climate emergency to finalise the tender documentation, enter into a contract, to undertake a procurement process in accordance with the council's contract procurement rules and public contract regulations 2015, and to agree the evaluation criteria model as set out in paragraph 11.13 of this report. So, colleagues, are we agreed to those recommendations?
Agreed.
Good. Right, how are we doing? And last but by no means least, or second to last but by no means least, we move on to the Q2 Finance and Performance Monitoring Report, which is another one for me. This covers the period from July to September. Events have overtaken quite a lot of what's in there, but it's a useful record of quite how much work was going on in terms of energy, waste, biodiversity, our actions supporting the cost of living, the supporting Ukrainian refugees. There's information in there about the performance of the leisure centre, work on the green economic development strategy, and general support for our high streets and market towns. So lots of progress in a wide range of areas, which is worthy of your attention. There's a financial update from the 30th of September. I think it's safe to say that that's aged quite a lot since there has been a lot of financial turmoil. It already indicates the pressures that we're under, showing the impact of the war in Ukraine, Brexit and other things that are affecting us, but also it doesn't fully reflect the full impact of the government's catastrophic September financial autumn statement, was it? It wasn't a budget, I don't think. So there is worse news to come, or more challenges to face in, as you saw, the medium-term financial strategy paper. Appendix 3 has the KPIs, and as you know, these are being revisited. There's none in there that require immediate action. And Appendix 4, again, and this ties into the point that was made earlier in the meeting about what's happening on the major programs, includes the highlight reports for each of the tier 1 so-called projects, priorities. Nothing is red and needing immediate attention. All the amber projects look like they're in hand. And then Appendix 5. So we're very grateful to the opposition and backbench colleagues who, through the performance panel, which is a subcommittee of the scrutiny committee, go through this report in detail. Cabinet members attend and answer questions. There are a set of insights and issues that came forward in that paper, but no actions for Cabinet, specifically in the performance panel minutes, and as far as I recall, coming from the scrutiny discussion of those minutes. So may have some questions, but first we have a deputation from Councillor Horrell.
Chair, thank you. And I think we all acknowledge that the panel and the scrutiny committee done sort of due diligence on the 2 report, and many of you were party to those discussions. I suppose the one question I have, and again, the council plan came before us earlier today, is the marrying up of the indicators, and you've already had a previous comment from the councillor regarding the indicators. There are indicators in the current report that the panel, I think, find useful and do refer to. The outline in CAB 3370 obviously reduces the number of indicators significantly, but I wonder whether you might consider an input from the panel and, and through the scrutiny committee for 1 or 2 others to be added, which I think we all find useful and can be used on an ongoing basis rather than having to wait for a year to pass. So it's simply a question of whether we can refine the indicators that the panel will be looking at going forward, obviously. So not related to Q2, but future iterations.
Thank you. It's a bit tricky to respond to that without knowing exactly what those indicators might be, and we have deliberately tried to focus them in terms of what gets high-level reporting. I am always open for input and suggestions, and I think we will have another round of scrutiny and of the performance panel before these KPIs are implemented. And of course, we will always listen to any case that is made in terms of how they might be changed. I think, though, the core intent of keeping focus on, bringing the word key back into performance indicators, making sure that they are the key ones and absolutely the key ones that we can use to measure and assess our performance is a key point. But of course, we are always open to suggestions and ideas from councillors, the public, and anybody as to how we can do a better job. Colleagues, are there any other questions that we have? I know that we've all seen this paper quite a few times in its journey to get here. So I think we were all at the performance panel, all or most of us at the performance panel where it was talked about in depth, and then it went to scrutiny, and I think quite a lot of us were there as well. We also have had some meetings where we were looking at the paper in draft in an earlier form. So there's probably, I can understand that you may have questioned yourself out in terms of this one. Are there any, is there any debate about this? Oh, Councillor Ferguson, far away.
Thank you, Leader. Just really to say that I look forward to these quarterly performance reports because I find them really informative. I actually do look at them in a great deal of detail, and I'm also pleased of the scrutiny that the performance panel puts them under and the list of questions that come forward. In many ways, I'd like the paper to be more present. This is referring back to quarter two, and a lot has changed. And if there was anything we could do to make them come sooner in any way, or bring them forward, so we're looking at a more present situation, I would find that beneficial. I think it's a valuable paper that's brought to Cabinet today, even though it has been out a couple of other times already, and support the fact that we see it here today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Yes, I agree with you, and as you know, I think it's quite important that that Cabinet members, as soon as we get to the point where this paper becomes available, are looking at it and understanding their own areas and identifying where action might need to be taken and other such things that need to be done. Although it is also right that we wait until the end of the process and we also hear from scrutiny and from the performance panel any comments that they may have before finally signing it off and sending it off to the county archives or wherever it goes next. But it is a useful document. I know there's a lot of work that goes into it, and it is one that I, like you, read through with great care and interest to see the full wide range of things that the council is doing in order to drive ahead the priorities we outlined in the council plan earlier. No questions, any debate, any other debate? So I suppose this is the moment to thanking all the people who've obviously sat at the centre of things and pulled it together. I think it's Simon, Mags and Ellen who losing the plot. Simon Howson. Too many Simons. We're about to have another one. Sorry, Simon Howson and Ellen Simpson who do the work to pull it all together, but it is a product of the entire organisation. There's nobody in the organisation who doesn't help pull this together. And I suppose, given it's the last Cabinet meeting before Christmas, it is an opportunity to thank all the officers who've worked so hard on all the reports we've seen over the last 12 months. But particularly this one, since that's the one on the agenda in front of us now, to thank them for their work. I hope they get a small break from filling out the next one, which they can't actually do until the end of December. So let's hope that this 2 weeks of not working on this report is an opportunity for everybody to have a very well-deserved break after what has been a challenging but also very positive year for the council and the city and district. Anyway, we need to agree this paper, or I think we are. What are we? We are agreeing. We are noting it, right? And I think we are noting it. We are noting the progress achieved during Q2 22-23, endorsing the contents of the report, including the action notes of the performance panel, and I don't think we'll formally add this to the minutes, and thanking all the officers for all their work, not just in fulfilling this report, but all the work they've done during the year. It is greatly appreciated and makes a huge difference. Residents, businesses, charities, other organisations of our city and district. Cabinet, do you agree?
Agreed.
Good. I apologise for not giving you the opportunity to agree enthusiastically. The last item on the agenda is to note the future items for consideration. Are you, assuming we're not going to debate that at length, does anybody have any comments or suggestions? No. In that case, I would ask that we all note the forward plan.
Agreed.
And I believe that brings us to the end of the meeting. So can I also thank all of you for all your work during the past 12 months. Thank all the work of those opposition councillors who in particular take the effort to look at all the papers, provide input, and even at times nudge us towards doing a better job than we would have done otherwise. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you also to the officers for all their work. And can I wish you all a very Merry Christmas, and I look forward to working with you all in the new year. And I declare the meeting